The little girl swung her legs under the booth. Her tiny shoes barely brushing the seat, she clutched a worn-out doll against her chest. Its fabric faded from being held too often. Across from her, her father sat tall in his suit, the glow of his tablet reflecting in his sharp eyes. He tapped the screen with practiced precision, flipping through charts and contracts, his mind worlds away from the small figure beside him. The diner smelled of coffee and butter, and the sound of sizzling bacon filled the air. When the waitress approached with a tray, her tired smile brightened the table like morning sunlight. She slid a plate of pancakes in front of the little girl, careful to shape them into a cheerful smile with strawberries and whipped cream. The child's eyes lit up in wonder. She looked up at the waitress, studying her face as though she had discovered something precious. The warmth, the gentle tone, the way she leaned down to make sure the pancakes were just right. It was the kind of tenderness she had longed for. With a small, shaky breath, the words slipped out before she could stop them. "Can you be my mommy?" The tray wobbled in the waitress's hand and her smile froze into shock. Her heart ached at the innocent plea, while the businessman's hand stopped midair, fingers hovering over his coffee cup. His eyes, so used to commanding boardrooms, widened as he turned slowly toward his daughter. In that instant, the hum of the diner seemed to vanish, and the three of them were caught in a silence, thick with emotions none of them were ready for. The CEO's throat tightened as he tried to find words, but nothing came. His daughter's innocent plea echoed in his ears like a truth he had been running from. For years he had buried himself in work, convincing himself that board meetings, stock reports, and endless deals were proof he was providing the best life for her. But as he looked at her now, her wide, pleading eyes searching for comfort from a stranger, instead of him, the armor he had built around himself began to crack. The waitress slowly crouched to the girl's level, her apron brushing the floor as she offered a tender smile. She tucked a strand of hair behind the little girl's ear with the kind of gesture only a mother might give. "Sweetheart," she said softly, her voice carrying both gentleness and restraint. "You already have a daddy who loves you very much." Her gaze flickered upward, meeting the man's. What she saw there startled her. Not the cold, untouchable businessman customers usually saw, but a man suddenly stripped of his confidence, staring back with raw guilt in his eyes. He shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tightening on his coffee cup as though holding it kept him steady. He swallowed hard but still couldn't speak. His daughter's tiny hand reached out, wrapping around the waitress's fingers, her grip desperate, as though afraid the kindness might slip away. The father's chest ached, the weight of her loneliness pressing against him like a stone he'd ignored for too long. For the first time in years, the spreadsheets and profit margins meant nothing because here, in this small diner, his little girl had just revealed the one thing money could never buy: the diner's chatter, clinking silverware, laughter from a nearby booth. The hiss of the coffee machine faded into the background until it was nothing but a dull hum. The little girl's small fingers clutched the edge of the waitress's apron, her eyes glistening with a mixture of hope and fear, as though she had spoken something forbidden yet deeply true. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Daddy is always busy. You're kind and you smile at me." The words pierced through the CEO like knives. Each syllable struck a chord of guilt he had buried beneath endless hours of work and ambition. His chest tightened, his jaw clenched. But there was no defense against the simplicity of her honesty. He had given her a mansion to live in, toys to play with, even the best schools, but not the warmth of a hand to hold at bedtime, not the laughter of shared moments, not the comfort she clearly craved. The waitress's throat burned as she blinked back tears. She had seen lonely children before, kids who longed for more than material gifts. But the rawness of this little girl's plea left her shaken. Gently, she placed her hand over the child's, her thumb brushing in a soothing circle. She didn't answer right away. She couldn't. The fragility in the girl's tone broke something inside her, something she didn't realize had still been vulnerable. The CEO's tablet sat untouched now, dark and forgotten on the table. For the first time in years, he lowered the walls that had shielded him from grief, success, and responsibility alike. His gaze fell on his daughter, not just the child he had been raising, but the little girl he had been failing. He noticed the way her eyes clung to kindness wherever it appeared, the way her voice trembled when asking for what her heart needed most. And for the first time he truly saw her, not as a duty, not as another responsibility to manage, but as his daughter, as a little girl aching for love. The cool evening air wrapped around them as the neon sign of the diner buzzed faintly above. The little girl hummed softly to herself, tracing her finger along the glass door while her father lingered a few steps away with the waitress. The CEO, so accustomed to negotiating billion-dollar deals with unshakable confidence, now found himself fumbling for words. His polished shoes shifted against the pavement, his hands buried deep in his pockets, as though hiding the tremor that betrayed him. He glanced at his daughter, who pressed her doll against the glass, blissfully unaware of the weight of the moment. His chest rose and fell as he forced himself to look at the waitress. For the first time, the commanding tone in his voice was gone. It was raw, stripped bare. I didn't realize how much she's been hurting, he admitted, his eyes heavy with a shame he couldn't mask. I thought stability, comfort, a good home, those things were enough. But she's been longing for something I can't seem to give, something I've been too blind to see. The waitress studied him quietly, her arms folded across her apron, not in judgment but in a cautious kind of empathy. She wasn't used to seeing powerful men look this fragile, and yet here he was, a father unraveling before her, not as a CEO but as a man terrified of failing the only person who truly mattered. He lowered his voice, almost a whisper now, as if confessing to the night itself. She needs warmth, affection, a tenderness I don't know how to offer. She looked at you tonight and, for the first time, I understood what's been missing. The waitress's heart squeezed. She wasn't glamorous, she didn't have wealth or prestige, but she carried something the little girl had recognized instantly: gentleness. And in that moment, she realized this man wasn't asking her to step into their lives as some fairy tale solution. He was simply a father, desperate to bridge the gap between his love and his daughter's aching loneliness. The silence stretched, broken only by the muffled laughter of strangers inside the diner. The waitress swallowed hard, unsure of what to say, but knowing deep down that this man's world had just shifted forever. The little girl skipped out of the diner with a newfound lightness in her step, her doll bouncing at her side. She reached out instinctively, grasping one of her father's hands and, without hesitation, the waitress's as well. Her tiny fingers linked them together like a bridge. Neither adult had expected to cross. The CEO glanced down, startled by the warmth of the waitress's hand against his own. It was unfamiliar yet strangely grounding. For years, his days had been filled with sterile boardrooms, contracts, and decisions that made him feel powerful but hollow. Now, walking slowly beneath the glow of street lamps, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself in a long time: peace. His daughter's laughter rang through the quiet evening, a sound that seemed to chase away the heaviness that had haunted him since his wife's passing. He studied her face, brighter now than it had been in months, and realized how rarely he had seen her this alive. The way she clung to the waitress told him more than words ever could. His daughter wasn't asking for extravagance. She was asking for love, for presence, for someone to notice her heart. The waitress, though hesitant, didn't let go of the child's hand. She felt the little girl's trust like a fragile gift, one she wasn't sure she deserved but couldn't reject. She glanced at the father, meeting his eyes briefly. In his gaze, she no longer saw the cold sharpness of a businessman, but the quiet desperation of a man who had finally understood what mattered most. They walked together slowly, as if no one wanted the moment to end. The city around them buzzed with hurried footsteps and glowing windows. But for this small trio, time seemed to move differently, slower, softer. That simple question from a child, "Can you be my mommy?" had shattered walls, rewritten priorities, and opened the door to something none of them had expected. Not a promise of instant family, not a fairy tale ending, but the fragile beginning of healing. For the first time in years, the father didn't think about tomorrow's deadlines. He thought only of the little girl who held their hands together, and the woman whose smile had reminded them both what love could feel like.